Tibetan Buddhism, like many traditions, has had a history of strict hierarchy and suppression of women's rights. An outsider might think it to be deeply rooted in the Buddhist culture of Tibet. In fact, the most commonly used word for woman in Tibetan is sakye diman, which literally means inferior birth, referring to her inherent physical insufficiencies due to bad karma. Buddhist doctrine is often referenced to justify male superiority. Even the works of such enlightened figures as Aryadeva and Shantideva describe a male rebirth as superior, explaining that, like a dog, a woman simply doesn't have the correct anatomy needed to foster consciousness which can attain awakening. As affirmed by the Buddha himself, these scriptural references result in lower expectations of women and cause them to doubt their own capabilities. So it's easy to see how bhikshus are regarded as worthy of respect, while bhikshunis, or anis, receive far less. Lack of support for women's practice has forced generations of religious women to remain at home rather than join an established monastic community. An unmarried woman may even shave her head, don monastic robes, and engage in spiritual practice while still working as a domestic servant. But monastic life can be a great option for women in the most traditional Tibetan societies because she would have freedom from having a family and the health dangers of multiple childbirths in an area of no medical facilities, let alone contraception. But their status as anis doesn't always free them from their obligations to their natal families, especially since it may be in their family's honor that they have become anis in the first place. But despite the decision to enter a sangha being made for them, they do sincerely want the spiritual benefits and freedoms of religious life. Also, they have an opportunity to receive an education which would otherwise not be possible. And despite the hierarchical system, anis have a chance to belong to a loving community of other women who value and respect each other. The anis' role in Tibet is often depicted as serving the bhikshuni without important practices of their own. For example, they produce food for the bhikshuni, the famous Tibetan butter. They also play a major role in the preparation of the New Year's festival. The life of the bhikshus is completely separate from that of the anis, and all their subtle practices are kept secret from the anis, despite their obvious dependence for the comfortable lifestyle of the bhikshus. But anis are known to have secret practices as well. These include their own New Year's rituals, as Grimshaw depicts for the first time at Julichang. Yet even more subtle is the lifestyle of the ani, which resembles the approach of Zen, with a complete focus on the mindfulness of daily tasks without intellectual study. Women in Tibet are controlled by an authority who announces them incapable of controlling themselves by saying that the female situation requires more restrictions, as she has a natural tendency to be misled. Ironically, the strict lifestyle of anis is even said to be an advantage. Anis are required to take 111 more vows than bhikshus. Being given a more specific path will result in a straighter shot to awakening. The result is that women in fact become more pious. His Holiness the Dalai Lama agrees that women are much more devout in all traditions, including Tibetan Buddhism. This effect is not limited to anis. Women outside of the sangha are expected to live more ideal lifestyles. In Himalayan Buddhist cultures, a woman is expected to be serene and subdued, humble and not arrogant, calm rather than hurried, patient rather than angry, kind rather than uncaring, focused on others rather than self-centered, and content rather than greedy. Interestingly, these are the same traits valued in a Buddhist practitioner. Similarly, in Tibetan society, the female already embodies the ideal model of compassion, as they are required to care for infants, children, the ill, frail, elderly, and dying. Witnessing suffering as this inspires many to seek liberation. In this environment, where the ideal lifestyle is required, it seems only natural that women would flourish in Buddhism, even without official representation. But women are not left completely defenseless in Tibet. Despite the commonplace of doctrinal references of women as inferior, there's also doctrinal references supporting the potential of women. Padmasambhava said, "Male, female, no great difference, but when she develops the aspiration for awakening, to be a woman is greater." Unfortunately, the institutionalized power of Tibet tended to not trust the tantric master. But as the tradition becomes more modern, there is again a shift in view. Kalu Rinpoche says that regardless of whether you are a man or woman, if you have faith, confidence, and diligence, if you have compassion and wisdom, you can become awakened. If you have the necessary qualities for Dharma practice, the kind of body you have makes no difference at all. His Holiness the Dalai Lama gives talks on the equal merit of women and their equal potential for Buddhahood. He defends his tradition's history by saying, "I think when Buddhism was founded, societies were generally male-dominated, so this social notion influenced religion. For example, when the Buddha came on the scene some 2,500 years ago, the society that the Buddha was preaching in was a male-dominated society. If he stressed feminist viewpoints, nobody would have listened to him. I think even these great masters used to teach according to the prevailing social circumstances. In Buddhism also, a bhikshu is considered higher than a bhikshuni. Ordained males usually sat higher. But the Dalai Lama personally endorses the women's right to full ordination, which is still an issue today in 2007. In the last 40 years, he has introduced the same levels of studies for both males and females. He acknowledges that the Buddha gave equal opportunities to women. Because of his support, any resistance to the idea of improving conditions for Anis is only expressed in neglecting to help. This understanding of equality is becoming more popular with each generation. Even in Tibet, the majority of young bhikshus accept women's potential as equal to men's. The image of the feminine in Tibetan Buddhism is most importantly seen in the Dakini, who far upstages her male equivalent, the Daka, known as Kandroma in Tibetan, which literally means skygoer or traveler in space. This image of a being who conquers the expanse of the sky depicts the mastery of the understanding of sunyata, described by Nyingma as beginningless purity, ka dang, or primordial freedom, ye grol. The Dakini is not the creator of this womb, but the discoverer of this which is always present. Dakinis appear in all the biographies of famous Tantra practitioners, along their path by clearing obstacles, challenging an intellectual approach, and uniting in sexual union. They embody the perfection of wisdom, and are regarded as the mother of all awakened ones, as if from their physical body all knowledge can be born. This idea that the female holds the secret step in awakening is further seen in the tantric description of the womb. The womb symbolizes the field of emptiness, sunyata, in which all things arise and fall. All phenomena are born out of this emptiness, and the womb is the enduring potential for impermanent phenomena. Therefore, a Dakini is a female wisdom being who, as the controller of the womb, transmits secret teachings to tantric practitioners. Dakinis also show us that the female form is not a physical limitation, as she is seen wielding weapons and engaging in violence not suitable for the demure idea of femininity which we insist grasping onto. For example, images of Dakinis are reminiscent of the fierce goddesses of Hinduism, such as Durga and Kali. She may wear a garland of human skulls with a trident staff leaning against her shoulder. Iconographic representations also tend to show the Dakini as a young naked figure in a dancing posture, often holding a skull cup filled with menstrual blood or the elixir of life in one hand and a curved knife in the other. Her hair is usually wild and hanging down her back, and her face is usually in a wrathful expression, as she dances atop a corpse, which represents her complete mastery over ego and ignorance. The unclothed image is meant to force the viewer to confront a being of great knowledge in the female form. The idea of humanity is not glossed over with the usual image of the male, and is instead expanded to include both genders. It is common for the Western viewer to see the Dakini's naked dance as sexual, but it would be incorrect to interpret the naked image as exclusively sexual. Her naked body reflects symbols of the naked or natural mind stripped of all obscuration and defilements. There are instances where a Dakini has come to test an aspirant's control over his sexual desires, but the Dakini should not themselves be constructed as beings of passion and sexuality. Their dance is a manifestation of their Shakti, which shows the movement of energy and space. In this context, the sky or space, like the womb, indicates sunyata, revealing how any manifestation is possible. Because of the infinite potential of sunyata, the female form must be capable of Buddhahood. For example, Vajradakini, known in Tibetan as Dorje Pangmo, shows the triumph over ignorance. One of her hidden aspects is Varuni, goddess of alcohol and intoxication. Therefore, Vajradakini's practice is said to be well suited for those with strong desirous attachments and those living in the current degenerate age. Her radiant red body is ablaze with the heat of yogic fire and is surrounded by the flames of wisdom. She is said to be the most important of the 5 wisdom Dakinis. These are the first 5 major Dakinis who appear in the Bardo Todal during the first 5 days of the Bardo. On each successive day, and each in inseparable union with one of the 5 Sambhogakaya Buddhas. The Buddha Dakini, Aka Sharatsvishvari, appears on the first day at the center, in union with Vairochana. Her color is white and her element is ether. She represents the wisdom of the universal law. Again, Vajradakini, known as Dorje Pangmo in Tibetan, appears on the second day in the east, in union with Akshobhya. Her color is blue and her element